Several hundred wild pigs are estimated to be living in Indiana. The pigs are an invasive species that were brought here in the late 80s.
There's a moment every farmer fears. You walk out at dawn, coffee in hand, and realize that your entire season's harvest has been wiped out. And somewhere, just beyond the tree line, the animals responsible are already sleeping off their last meal. This is a problem farmers have been dealing with for decades, but now, after years of losing crops and watching hog populations explode, farmers have finally found a solution. And surprisingly, it's not bigger guns, stronger fences, or more traps. In fact, some of the strategies are so strange and downright ridiculous that they sound like they shouldn't work at all. Yet in many cases, they're proving to be far more effective than the traditional methods farmers relied on for decades. And to understand why, we first need to see just how serious this problem has become across the world. A global problem. Most people think wild boar damage is a problem limited to rural Texas. But it isn't. What is happening in Texas is only one part of a much bigger story, one that has been unfolding across the world for decades. In Italy, in 2022, protesters marched through the streets of Rome wearing boar masks, demanding that the government recognize the scale of damage being done to farms across the country. Wild boars were raiding vineyards in Tuscany, tearing through grain fields in Umbria, and wandering through the suburbs of Rome itself. And Italy isn't unique. On the other side of the world, Japan has been dealing with a remarkably similar crisis. The Japanese word for wild boar is inoshishi, an animal that, for most of the 20th century, was associated mainly with remote mountain villages. But as populations expanded, that changed. By 2005, wild boars were responsible for more than 26% of all animal-related crop damage across the country. In Germany, hunters were tracking wild boars through the streets of Berlin. Researchers studying the city's urban boar population found that nearly 1 in 5 carried antibodies for leptospirosis, a bacterial disease capable of spreading to livestock, pets, and humans through contaminated water. The issue was no longer just about damaged crops. It had become a public health concern. And in the United States, the numbers reflect just how severe the problem has become. According to the USDA, feral swine cause roughly $2.5 billion in agricultural damage every single year. And that figure is still climbing. By this point, a pattern becomes impossible to ignore. This isn't a local problem that got out of hand in one state or one country. It's a global problem that has been quietly growing for decades, appearing in different forms, but following the same trajectory almost everywhere it takes hold. And the reason it kept growing is surprisingly simple: the failing methods. For decades, the standard approach for controlling wild boars was built around a simple idea: make them afraid. If farmers could make a field feel dangerous enough, the animals would stay away. And that's what they did. Electric fences, floodlights, motion-activated alarms, propane cannons that blasted loud explosions across fields every few hours. Some even hung ammonia-soaked rags along fence lines because the smell was thought to mimic predator scent and trigger an instinctive retreat. On paper, it all sounded reasonable. But in field after field, country after country, the results were disappointing. And the reason comes down to how wild boars are wired. Most prey animals survive by reacting instantly to danger. But wild boars have evolved differently. They are highly social animals. They are exceptionally intelligent, and, perhaps most importantly, they make decisions based on a constant calculation of risk versus reward. Wildlife researchers often describe this as a caloric cost-benefit calculation. In simple terms, a boar asks one question: is the food worth the risk? And when the answer is yes, fear starts losing the argument. Take a look at the numbers. A mature wild boar weighing around 200 pounds can require roughly 14 pounds of food every single day just to maintain its condition. That's not a preference. It's a biological requirement. Day after day, the animal has to find enough calories to survive. Now imagine what a cornfield looks like from a boar's perspective. Thousands upon thousands of calories concentrated in one location. No searching, no hunting, no long-distance travel, just row after row of easy food. Suddenly, a flashing light doesn't seem very threatening, neither does a loud noise. Researchers have repeatedly observed this pattern. In controlled studies, feral hogs exposed to acoustic deterrents often became accustomed to them in fewer than 3 encounters. Not 3 months, not 3 weeks, but only 3 times. The propane cannon fires. The hogs stop for a moment. They look around. Then they go right back to eating. The next morning, the farmer checks the camera footage and sees the same group standing in the same field at almost the same time as the night before. The lights worked. The alarms worked. The cannon fired exactly as designed. Yet the boars never left. What many people assumed was bravery wasn't bravery at all. The animals weren't making bold decisions. They weren't outsmarting the technology. They weren't adapting in some extraordinary way. They were simply following biology. Their brains had already calculated that the reward outweighed the risk. And once researchers understood that, it became clear why so many traditional control methods kept failing. The problem wasn't that the deterrents were weak. The problem was that they were trying to fight hunger with fear, and hunger was winning. The breakthrough came when farmers stopped focusing on the hogs' strengths and started looking for their weaknesses. And it turned out, the animals had one vulnerability almost nobody was paying attention to: the hidden weakness. Here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. For years, farmers believed feral hogs were nearly unstoppable because of their physical strength, intelligence, and ability to adapt. A mature boar can weigh more than 250 pounds, push through weak fencing, and travel several miles in a single night in search of food. They seem to have an answer for every obstacle placed in their path. But researchers eventually uncovered something surprising. Despite their reputation as highly capable survivors, wild boars have one significant weakness that almost no one noticed. Their eyesight isn't nearly as good as most people assumed. Studies conducted by wildlife researchers, including observations from the University of Georgia's Warnell School of Forestry and Natural Resources, found that feral hogs have relatively poor long-distance vision. While they can detect movement, their ability to clearly identify objects drops significantly beyond about 20 to 30 meters. And during the low light conditions when they are most active, that limitation becomes even more pronounced. Instead of relying on sight, hogs navigate the world primarily through smell and hearing, and both are extraordinary. A feral hog's nose contains hundreds of millions of scent receptors, allowing it to locate food buried beneath the soil and detect odors from remarkable distances. Their hearing is equally sharp, helping them pick up subtle sounds that may indicate danger long before they can see anything clearly. This discovery helped explain a mystery many farmers had observed for years. Hogs often seemed completely unaware of barriers, traps, or even nearby people, until they were surprisingly close. Then an experiment in Oklahoma revealed just how important this weakness could be. Working alongside wildlife consultants, a landowner installed standard livestock panels around a test area. But instead of reinforcing the fence itself, researchers modified its appearance. They attached dark, non-reflective material along the lower portion of the panels, blocking visibility at ground level and removing any clear sight lines. To the hogs approaching in the darkness, the barrier no longer looked like a simple fence. It became an unfamiliar and visually confusing obstacle, something their eyes couldn't quite interpret. And that's when they stopped moving. The lead animals moved back and forth, attempting to assess what they were looking at. Several circled the perimeter. Others paused and sniffed the air. None of them committed to crossing. For more than 40 minutes, the group remained outside the enclosure, before eventually leaving the area. Nothing about the barrier had become stronger, but visually, it had become uncertain. And for an animal that depends heavily on smell and hearing rather than sight, uncertainty alone can be enough to make them turn back, turning their greatest strength against them. By this point, researchers understood something important. You cannot reliably scare wild boars, and you cannot fool them with barriers they can push through or walk around. But their nose, the very thing that made them so dangerous, turned out to be a vulnerability no one had thought to exploit. A feral hog's sense of smell is among the most powerful of any land mammal. Wildlife researchers estimate that hogs can detect food buried more than 3 feet underground and track scent trails that are hours old. Long before a hog ever sees a cornfield, it has already smelled it from a significant distance. That gave farmers an idea. Instead of trying to block hogs from finding food, what if they could convince them to go somewhere else entirely? That question led to a field trial in Louisiana in 2023. Researchers and agricultural specialists began experimenting with a fermented corn mixture known as sour mash, made by soaking corn in water for several days until it produced a powerful, unmistakable odor. The smell was impossible for hogs to ignore, but the bait wasn't placed randomly. But the bait wasn't scattered randomly. Farmers would put out large batches of sour mash away from their fields. This created a strong scent trail that attracted hogs and pulled them away from the crops. The goal was straightforward: give the hogs something easier to find than the crops themselves. And it worked. Trail cameras showed entire sounders changing their normal travel routes to follow the stronger scent source. Rather than entering corn and peanut fields, groups of hogs moved toward the baited areas instead. On one farm that had experienced repeated nighttime damage, crop intrusions stopped completely for nearly 2 weeks after the scent corridors were established. The crops hadn't been hidden. The hogs had simply been redirected. The one-night rule. In 2022, researchers working with the Caesar Kleberg Wildlife Research Institute in South Texas began tracking something that farmers had never been able to measure before: the time at which wild boars attack. Using GPS collars attached to more than 100 feral hogs across multiple ranches, scientists recorded thousands of movement patterns over several months, and the results revealed something unexpected. Wild hogs weren't roaming randomly. They were operating on a schedule. Researchers found that peak feeding activity consistently occurred between 10:30 p.m. and 2:15 a.m. During that 4-hour window, more than 70% of all recorded crop intrusions took place. That meant the vast majority of damage farmers were waking up to every morning was happening during the exact same period of every night. But an even more important discovery followed. When hogs encountered resistance during those hours, a blocked entry point, a failed feeding attempt, or a disrupted event, they often reacted very differently than expected. Instead of returning immediately, entire groups frequently abandoned the area for days. One documented case from South Texas in November 2023 showed exactly how powerful this effect could be. A farmer monitoring a large corral trap watched as a sounder of 26 hogs entered a baited area at 11:58 p.m. He didn't trigger the gate. Not yet. He waited. At 12:07 a.m., when every animal in the group was inside and feeding, the trap was activated. The entire sounder was captured in under 10 seconds. But what happened afterward surprised everyone. Trail cameras monitoring nearby fields recorded no new hog activity for 9 consecutive nights, despite known populations living in the surrounding area. Researchers believe feral hogs develop what biologists call temporal memory, associating certain locations with experiences tied to specific times of night. A winning fight. After using scent corridors, visual barriers, coordinated trapping efforts, and the one-night rule to their advantage, farmers finally started seeing something they hadn't seen in a very long time. No fresh rooting, no destroyed corn rows, no muddy tracks cutting across newly planted fields. Some farmers went weeks without a single intrusion. Others made it through entire growing seasons without losing a crop. But then, something terrible happened. At first, just one animal, then 2, then entire groups. Almost overnight, the same fields that had been untouched for months showed fresh signs of destruction. And the most frustrating part was that these weren't the same hogs. In many cases, the original sounders had already been removed. So where were the new animals coming from? That question led researchers to one of the most important discoveries ever made in feral hog management. In 2024, a multi-county investigation coordinated through the USDA National Feral Swine Damage Management Program examined what happened to farmland after successful hog removal operations across Texas and Oklahoma. The results were blunt. Even in areas where local populations had been reduced by nearly 90%, reinfestation occurred within just 4 to 6 months. Not because the removals had failed, not because hidden groups had survived, because entirely new hogs had moved in. Wild boars are surprisingly mobile. Adult sounders can roam across territories exceeding 30 square miles, while young dispersing males regularly travel 10 to 15 miles searching for food, mates, and unclaimed habitat. One South Texas farmer learned this firsthand. Over 18 months, he successfully removed more than 70 hogs belonging to 3 separate sounders. After the final trapping operation, his trail cameras recorded almost no activity for 12 weeks. The fields stayed clean. The crops remained untouched. Then, during a single night, a completely new sounder appeared on camera. 19 hogs. None had been seen before. Footage suggested they had entered from a neighboring property less than 3 miles away. The new strategy. Now farmers are using a completely different approach. Instead of relying on a single trap, a single fence, or a single hunting method, they are combining multiple strategies at the same time. And for the first time, they are starting to gain the upper hand. Trail cameras monitor movement across entire regions. Neighboring landowners share information and coordinate trapping efforts. Wildlife researchers track where hogs travel, when they move, and what resources they depend on most. The goal is no longer to react to the animals. It's to predict them. And that shift has led to 3 of the most effective strategies farmers have ever used. The first came from the sky. By 2025, thermal-equipped drones were flying over ranches throughout Texas. Operating between 100 and 150 meters above the ground, they could scan thousands of acres in complete darkness without alerting the animals below. Within 7 nights, a sounder of 31 hogs entered the site and was captured in a single operation. During dry periods, visits to controlled water points increased by as much as 300%. And then there's the final challenge: reproduction. A single breeding sow can produce 2 litters every year, averaging 5 to 6 piglets per litter. Under ideal conditions, populations can grow by more than 150% annually. So researchers stopped targeting the hogs themselves. Using a contraceptive vaccine known as Gonacon, field trials reduced reproduction by more than 60% within 18 months. Individually, each strategy was powerful, but together, they are giving farmers something they had never possessed before. The ability to find hogs, the ability to predict hogs, and the ability to stop the next generation before it ever reached the field. The battle is far from over. But for the first time in years, the hogs are no longer the only ones adapting. In the end, the solution to wild boars wasn't a new tool, a bigger trap, a stronger fence, or even a more powerful weapon. The real breakthrough came from understanding the animal itself, how it thinks, how it moves, what resources it depends on, and what instincts drive its decisions. So after hearing all of this, what do you think? Can this new method of fighting finally help us eliminate this problem? Let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. If you liked this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more amazing stories like this. We'll see you next time.